Hello everybody, welcome back to the Along Come Norwich YouTube channel for a video where I don't really know why I'm smiling, but Norwich City have lost 2-1 at home to Middlesbrough in a game where it's going to be hard to dissect the game. We'll try, but we will be sort of going on some tangents just as a word of warning. I hope you're all doing well. Tonight was a more chilly one than what we have been used to as of late. But yeah, Norwich City are stuck in limbo. Limbo is the word that is being tossed around the Norwich City sphere at the moment. It's the word that I think best describes the state of Norwich in terms of the squad and just the ambitions for the season and perhaps where the fans are in terms of expectation. It all feels rather strange. The first thing I want to say is I don't think it's as bad as when Dean Smith was in charge by any stretch, but also I'm sat there with the same feeling of, well, what's next? What are we aiming for? What is the realistic expectation for fans this season? What's going on, really? It is a tough one for Norwich at the moment. Let's start with today's game. I think it really reflects where Norwich City are in terms of everything about today was, and the word I used on Twitter in the heat of the moment, which I kind of stand by, was cringeworthy. There was no real structure to anything. The passing in terms of individual quality was really poor. I'm not going to pick out any names in particular, but passes were sort of being zipped across the pitch with no real sort of thought for who was on the receiving end. Balls were sort of dragging behind players. Balls were zipping way too far in front of them as well. And you sort of sat there like, okay, what is going to happen tonight? And the game, from the first 15, 20, 25 minutes went exactly how you would expect it, especially with the vein of form that Norwich City find themselves in. As I said, the quality just was not there. Well, Norwich, especially in the first half, when Norwich finally got into that final third position, things just seemed to peter out. And I'm not going to batter Middlesbrough by any means, but tonight really felt like Middlesbrough just came and took the 3 points that Norwich City offered them, as opposed to sort of coming here and showing too much quality. They weren't bad by any stretch. It's just, I think Middlesbrough put in sort of a 6.5 out of 10 and Norwich went for a solid 4.3 out of 10. And if you look at those two numbers and those two ratings next to each other, obviously Middlesbrough are going to go and score. They scored their 2 goals at the most painful times, literally right after half time, and just as it was announced that there'd be 9 minutes added on, where Norwich City could have maybe, not that anyone was expecting it, go on to perhaps claw a point from that game. In terms of what I want to talk about going forward, I don't really know what the game plan is for Norwich City at the moment. They've shown their hand in terms of the new sporting director to come in. Obviously, he doesn't come in for a while, and when he does, it'll take some time for him to bed in, and Stuart Webber will be there to hold his hand and whatever. But it really feels like Norwich is stuck in a state of limbo. And by that, what I mean is David Wagner is I feel for him. I really do, in the sense of I don't think his squad is great. I don't think it's bad. But I don't think he'll be here after Christmas. I'm not too afraid to say that, in the sense of with a new sporting director, and I don't think he'll have as much freedom as Webber did to rip things up and start again. But by no means do I think that doesn't mean he can't hire his own coach. With a sporting director, especially with how this role is becoming more and more important in the game. And I think Norwich City were, a big club in terms of pushing the importance of that role. A sporting director's job is to come in and set the culture. With Stuart Webber, it was a massive reform, wasn't it? With Ben Napper, I think it will be maybe not a slight tweak, but it'll be a bigger than slight tweak in terms of getting it back on track. Because under Stuart Webber, I think it was decent for a while, wasn't it? 2 championship titles don't just happen. But when you want to reset a culture both on and off the pitch, however drastic that is, you want to appoint your own coach. So especially when you look at the contract that David Wagner is on, I'm not going to sit here and say, it's a really easy to sack him contract, but it's not a Daniel Farkas just signed a 4-year contract type situation. So I'm kind of sat there thinking, well, he's going to go at some point, especially with how results are going. On the pitch, Norwich City are pretty diabolical at the moment, and the tough thing about it is, there was lots of hype at the beginning of the season, and I myself, we didn't fall for it. We weren't swindled, but there was the belief of, okay, right, we've learned from last season, then it's time to kick on, because, offensively, there were some really good passages. Johnny Rowe kind of broke onto the scene again and has proven his quality. Gabriel Sara, complete quality there. Ashley Barnes and Sarge working really well up top, and an element of that sort of feeling a bit sorry for Wagner comes from Barnes and Sargent being injured, and what an important part they were to scoring goals. It's no secret that Wagner's style of football is heavy metal. It's this whole idea of where you just want to score more than what you concede, and then his lack of playing with a defensive midfielder, for example, Oliver Skipp, for Norwich, that kind of player, his lack of desire to do that essentially is pretty apparent. And when you pluck out Barnes and Sargent from a fairly positive start to the season, it's then like, oh, well, what do we do now? And to continue the tangent, when you're sat there with Hwang coming off the bench, you're a bit like, okay, this is not going to get much more fun. And to that point, let's talk about the future again and the state of the squad. Norwich went for something different in terms of, Stuart Webber said, look, we're going to go for a bit more experience. In the past, we've tried something slightly different, and it hasn't worked in terms of establishing ourselves at the Premier League level. And, you have to strip it back to the Championship and try again. That's what we've been doing. But, it really isn't there at the moment in terms of the quality of players that we have. I think, again, if you look at tonight, you've got the defence that just can't defend at all, even at the best of this season. Again, this season, I don't even know how many games we are in now, not very many in the grand scheme of things. We just can't defend. And the fact that the goals are now drying up because the passages of play, there's the quantity is less and less. It's a bit like, well, there is almost a feeling of an impending doom. And the answer to it for me, I don't think it's now sack Wagner and try and get someone else in to try and turn the season around. I think it's just kind of... do you know what? I honestly don't know. I really don't know. And I think that's the big problem at the moment. And when making these kind of videos, I think, for me especially, you always want that kind of clarity and that ability to say, look, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. It's a really hard thing to do at the moment. And that's okay as a fan, where we don't really know what's going on. And I think today was a good example of the crowd didn't really want to turn. There was a few boos at halftime, a few murmurs. It was a bit half-hearted, and I think that was sort of evidence of the fact that this crowd, it doesn't want to turn on Norwich. I don't think it enjoys it. But at full time, especially after that second half performance, the boos were quite loud. And for me, in the River End, amongst all its extremes, it felt quite disgruntled. The first time that it's really felt like that for quite some time. But today, Norwich City were really poor, and it links back, it's the same for the last game as well, against Leeds, where, I don't know, tactically you have to be like, right, come on, Wagner, you need to learn that you can still create offensively, but defensively there needs to be some sort of plan, some sort of structure. You can't just rely on Shane Duffy sort of constantly backing off defenders and hoping that will work. But yeah, we're stuck in a state of limbo. I really don't know what else to add to the matter. It's a really tough one. It is a really tough one at the moment, and I think the trajectory of Norwich City at the moment, as I said, that feeling of impending doom suggests that results maybe aren't going to get any better. And I don't really think there's this classic thing, isn't there, where fans will have like super sub syndrome. So for example, when Vrancic was off the pitch, it was always he was the answer, and Connor Southwell, I'll give him credit for this, called it Kyle Lafferty syndrome, where it's the player who isn't playing is always the answer. And I actually don't think that's really been the case for like Sargent, for Barnes, where perhaps in the past maybe it would have been, where we're sat there thinking, right, okay, Sargent is the answer, Barnes is the answer. I think everyone at this point is just a bit like, what next? And I personally, and I don't think Carrow Road has any ill feelings towards David Wagner. I think he's done a fantastic job in terms of the culture between the club and us, especially on the pitch. He's tried to rebuild that sort of trust and rebuild that faith to a point where it's now it was kind of going like that, and now it's just petering is what it's doing, which is a shame, but football is a ruthless business. I think the only reason he'll keep the job for the next however long is because football doesn't stop, does it? And if you stop in football, I mean, very quickly, look at Leicester, for example, very quickly you can see a team get relegated, and until it's addressed, again, Leicester, until it's addressed, you then can't correct, I'm not going to say the wrongdoings, but you then can't correct what has seemingly gone wrong. That's my stance for now, to be honest. Usually at the end of these videos, I like to be able to say, look, this is what I want to happen. This is what I think should happen. At the moment, I don't know. But yeah, hopefully the podcast that I have planned will do a better job, or in terms of the guests that I get on, will do a better job in perhaps proposing something for us to cling on to. But for now, it's a very difficult thing for myself to do. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm sure we're all sort of in the same boat at the moment. What do you think Norwich City should do? I am very keen to know. Leave a thumbs up if you're feeling generous. Subscribe too if you fancy it. I'll see you again very, very soon.